Thank you, sir. Next speaker for the day is Mr. Avishkar Srivastava, sir, Chief Innovation Officer at the PDP Group. He has over 7+ years of work experience in the corporate world. He has successfully led the PDP Group to win the 2020 Digital Samurai Supply Chain Award for accelerating digitalization strategy to increase resilience and optimizing business processes. He has completed his BCom in Marketing, Innovation and Entrepreneurship from University of Auckland. Sir is passionate about transforming workplace cultures to digital systems and human resource management. Sir is also has a keen interest in logistic industry and is always excited to uncover new ways to increase operational efficiency. It gives us immense pleasure to welcome you to deliver a keynote, sir. Over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Arun, for the wonderful introduction. So, before we begin, I would just like the audience to understand the logistics industry. The Indian logistics market today is pegged at US $215 billion. So that's a huge industry right now. And when we have been focusing on this COVID pandemic and we have been seeing how the world had almost come to a standstill, we understood the resilience of the Indian supply chain, where we were understanding how the various segments of the Indian supply chain come together to ensure that all our daily needs were being met, and at the same time, the industries which keep the wheels of the Indian GDP running, how they were able to get the raw materials despite container shortages in the country, despite where port clogging in several ports of the world, we were able to keep the wheels of the economy running. Now, the very interesting part is we have kept the wheels of the economy running despite only around 10 to 15% of this logistics industry covered by organized sector. So that is a really strange way of looking at how people with a lack of a formal knowledge have kept the machinery running. We can be proud of the resilience and the hard work of the people, or we can look at this as an opportunity. Like once this sector gets more and more organized, imagine the potential it has in our country, because just with 10 to 15% of people in the organized sector, we are able to perform in a resilient manner in the country, where we have so many customs brokers working in the country. We have several transporters, and around 80% transporters are having just less than 5 vehicles. That is the reality, because our logistics sector has often been dominated by a lot of informal players. I would like to thank IIT Delhi for having a robust supply chain program, because these curriculums are very important. We are having graduates coming out from very good B schools, but they have not had specializations in the supply chain and operations management sector. So what we are getting is we are getting people with a lot of knowledge on the principles of management, but how to incorporate it into the logistics and supply chain, that becomes a challenge for all. A small warehousing segment which is being talked a lot, it is estimated to be worth USD 13 billion by 2024. So these are big numbers which we are talking about. And how do we maximize value? How do we maximize productivity to get our our companies, or the companies you guys will be joining, how to make a lasting impact in a short duration? Because let's understand certain facts, like our careers are limited. We cannot be working throughout our lives. We have limited periods, and we all have a lot of ambition in our professional careers. How do we go from starting up in a place to getting to the higher positions? In order to do that, we need to understand the core of the business where we are working in. Logistics requires a complete coordination between equipment and manpower. I will shed light on the importance of digitalization, but before doing that, let's understand we are dealing with people who we are dealing in companies where there are a lot of sophisticated infrastructure, digital infrastructure. We have IoT devices running. We have various kind of monitoring tools to understand pilferages, to block the pilferage of fuel and other materials while the trailers are in transit. At the same time, these machines are being operated by our forklift operators, by our trailer drivers, who have unfortunately lacked an education qualification. And so we need to understand how do we merge the soft digitalization power with the hardcore people who are working on the field and are toiling away to make sure that our supply chains are running. We have seen in the logistics sector, like right now a focus is lot on the e-commerce. E-commerce is the couriers and the q-commerce right now it's being called, because there are deliveries happening within 1 to 2 hours. Our food is being delivered to our doorstep in an hour or in 2 hours. So we are moving from e-commerce to q-commerce, which is quick commerce, quick logistics. At the same time, we need to keep in mind that logistics also involves some more volume-based and container-based transport, which includes your customs clearance, it includes your freight forwarding, it includes involvement of inland container depots and container freight stations, which keep the wheels of the economy running. It has been interesting when we talk to youngsters and they are seeing these trailers carrying containers, and they are like, okay, it looks like a box, I don't know what it is, but there are so many liabilities with that container movement, because there are foreign shipping lines involved, there are deadlines involved. When can you deliver, when we have to drop off the container after an import is completed? How long do you have once the container is picked up to ship it to the port? So we are talking about a very vast field with various components which often are working in silos. You have a documentation team, you have an operations team, you have your transport management team, you have an inventory management team. There are different types of teams working, and the only way we can coordinate with them is if there is a seamless flow of information across the different segments. That can only happen with digitalization. I have written an article on how digitalization can give long lasting returns. Unfortunately, in our country, when we are looking at the small and medium organizations, when we hear about digitalization, the response is, wow, this is really great, it's amazing. And when we approach further, okay, so do you want to try it? And that's when, okay, I think my work is going on fine right now, I think it's okay, we can try it later. This later mindset is leading to a clog in our supply chain, because today we are still relying a lot on those manual excel sheets, manual flow of information between people. We are still a very people dominated industry, and in order for us to reach that $5 trillion benchmark of the government, we need to become a knowledge oriented industry. In order to do that, we need to look at digitalization as an investment and not just as a cost. Because once we are looking at digitalization as an investment, we will understand which are the areas where we can invest money in with an expectation of a return. And that return will take time. I want to make this very clear, because many people assume that once we invest in a certain kind of a software or a certain kind of a platform, why are the results not coming within 2 weeks or 3 weeks? That's because we need to build the databases. We need to understand how the data is being captured in the systems, and once the data get captured, we can then have a trend analysis going. And for that, we need a skilled team as well, who will be focused on understanding the data and on understanding the benchmark and where we are in terms of reaching the benchmark. We are dealing with very strict timelines in the logistics sector. You people will be joining the top logistic companies, and we will understand that the customer requires you to give the best service at the most affordable costing, because the competition is cutthroat. So how do we manage that? How do we manage our supply chain to make sure that we are able to deliver the best possible service with optimum utilization of resources? That can happen through digitalization. Once you have an operations team completely focused on a cloud-based system and they are working on the cloud, and that information is flowing through to the transport department, what does that do? It minimizes unnecessary communication. You will be surprised to understand that there are still various companies which are operating on a call to call basis, which is personal relations. Now, personal relations are good, but personal relations should be encouraged for problem solving, not for taking day to day updates, which should be on a common platform. Today, if there is a problem which is happening in the logistics sector, we need to pinpoint which was the area which caused this issue. Otherwise, we always surround ourselves in a situation where we are getting very person dependent. We will ask a line manager or an operations manager to pinpoint the issue, and he will use his best judgment to find the issue. But judgments are usually not the best approach to find and pinpoint issues. We need data, and then we need to analyze that data and then correlate it with the judgment of an experienced person. We need to have starting points in our logistics sector, and we need to focus on how we can coordinate across these different departments using tech and using digital tools. We have talked about IoT devices, we have talked about route optimization, we are talking about anti-pilferage devices. how do we manage these devices, how are we involved in, how are we incorporating these devices in our supply chain to make sure that they are being utilized and they are not just a fancy word which we put in our brochures when we meet our clients. That can only be done through good coordination with the digitalization team, the managers, and the human resource department. Because in order to create a vision of digitalization, we need people who believe in that vision. We will not be able to fulfill the objectives if we are just pushing it down the line with people who are not much accustomed with the new tools. So any time we are understanding about the route optimization, we should also speak with the person behind the wheels on what is his view with the new route optimization process, and we can then have a domino effect. Because in order for the industry to adapt digitalization, we need people from all levels talking about it. And by talking about it, there can be praises about it, there can be complaints about it. But once we start talking about something, we are raising awareness on the issue. And digitalization is something where we have really noticed it a lot in the e-commerce sector today. As soon as we book a shipment, we get our SMS, we get our mail notifications every time a particular step is taking place. But when it comes to the hard logistics of containerized shipments, of containerized movements, where an importer is booking maybe 150 containers at one time for his machinery, they are still not receiving the optimum level of tech-based reports which they should be receiving in the current era. As we are moving to industry 4.0, we need to understand how do we fulfill these requirements and how do we invest in digitalization in a appropriate manner. It is not just about spending a lot of money and then expecting magic to happen. It doesn't happen like that. It has to happen once you're spending money, you have a team behind you who is analyzing what are the investments which are going on and how are these databases going to help you in fulfilling your business requirements. And once that happens, there will be an effect where people will stop working in silos. People will understand the responsibility of their own work and how that responsibility gets transferred over once their job is complete, and how it has an end-to-end effect in the supply chain. We are dealing with reach stackers, forklifts, trailers, of course, overhead cranes. There are many types of equipment which are in process. Breakdown of even one equipment leads to a temporary break stoppage of the supply chain. Preventive maintenance is very important. When we talk about logistics and supply chain, we focus a lot on important aspects. I agree. The important aspects are route optimization. The important aspects are anti-pilferage devices, trailer management softwares. At the same time, preventive maintenance is so important. We sometimes wonder that, okay, this is a part of the maintenance team, it's not really related to me. But when you are a manager in a logistics firm, you need to understand how every area needs to have a stopgap, needs to have a place, have frameworks in place to make sure that the wheels of the logistics supply chain is running. For that, you need backups, you need preventive maintenance, you need checks and balances with all your workmen, your executives, your managers, and you need to give transparent report to your top management. Because once you are giving those transparent reports through data driven mechanisms, you will be able to understand that yes, this is the problem. As per the data, these are the areas where we need to work on to resolve these issues, and then we can come to a conclusion or come to a process where those areas can be looked into. Today, our government has launched several unique initiatives in the warehousing sector. One of them recently is a Manufacturing and Other Operations in Warehouse Regulations Act, Government of India. It's known as MOVES 2019. I would request all the participants to go through it. It's MOOWRS MOVES 2019, which talks about that all you need is a warehouse and a customs broker license, and then an importer can set up a factory at your warehouse where the goods will be coming in. They don't need to pay any duty. And once the manufacturing is done, that duty gets adjusted with the exports which are taking place, or even for domestic transportation. This is a small example, but what I mean is we need to read. We need to read a lot when it comes to notifications, when it comes to circulars. We need to understand what is happening in the logistics industry. A notification or a circular captures the spirit of what the government is considering in terms of the supply chain. We are hearing a lot about how Indian logistics is expensive. The cost is around 14% of the GDP, and the government is trying to get it to 10% and 8%. How is that going to happen? It's going to happen when these top managers who will be coming out of this institute will be joining the respective companies and understanding how to find trends. There is so much of wastage which is happening in the supply chain. How can we pinpoint those wastages, and how can we work upon those wastages to make sure that the supply chain is getting a little efficient every single day? Because that little improvement which will happen every single day will lead to a marked improvement at the end of the year. And I believe these are the areas which we will really need to focus on in the future, because the competition is only going to get tougher. We are dealing with world markets right now where we are competing with China, we are competing with Thailand and many other countries, African countries as well, where the cost of production is getting lower and lower. And our exporters need a reliable logistics partner as well, whom they can depend on to ensure that the goods which are being exported in a timely manner. If goods are being imported, they need to be completely delivered in a timely manner so that a re-export can take place. And these are areas which can happen once we have strong investments in digital tools, not just the IoT devices, but even our backend, because the backend will ensure how the monitoring is taking place. We need to speak with different software operators and at the same time focus on our in-house IT team as well, who can maximize and utilize the softwares which we purchase to the optimum potential. With this, I would like to congratulate the Accentuate Operations Club for the launch of the Opulent magazine. You guys are doing a great job, and I wish all the best to all the students attending the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the insightful speech. I'm sure the audience had useful key takeaways from the speech, and we look forward to reading your article in our magazine. Further, we would like to ask the audience to ask any questions that they have. Students can raise their hands or they can type in the questions in the chat box. Vinay, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, sir, for the informative session. Sir, my question is, how can schemes like Sagarmala or dedicated freight corridor or inland waterways can bring down the logistic cost in the country?
Yeah, thank you, Vinay, for the question. So yeah, let's talk about the dedicated freight corridors and coastal shipping as well. Right now, the Indian logistics is highly dependent on road transportation. Around 70% of our movements is happening through road, and the government is trying hard to make this shift. So what is a dedicated freight corridor is they are making a complete network ready for movement of cargo in through the different quadrilateral network. So the current focus right now is to bolster the cargo movement through rail and through the river route. Inland waterways has its own set of challenges, which is the depth of the river, because the inland waterways is mainly from the eastern part of the country, and it is moving through the national waterways to this Varanasi and these other areas. So it's a very good scheme of the government, because at least efforts are now being made. But the problems which the trade is facing in terms of inland waterways is that the draft is not very uniform throughout the year. So this is a reason where the inventory planning, there are issues which are taking place. In terms of the rail movement, so I would just like to mention on these, like in terms of rail movement, there are a lot of developments happening in the country. There is a cross-border movement which happens to Bangladesh by road, and you will be surprised to know that trailers are waiting at that Petrapol station for around 15 to 20 days in the parking area because there is so much congestion. Now the government is starting rail movements up to Benapol in Bangladesh, where 80 containers are moving overnight to Bangladesh, and this is greatly reducing the cost. So yeah, in terms of the future, inland waterways is the future, and dedicated freight corridors with rail terminals in different areas is the future. Road network has to be for the first and last mile as we move forward. It cannot be for journeys of 600 to 800 kilometers, which is still happening right now. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vinay. Surbi, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you, Arun. Good afternoon, sir. So my question is that due to digitalization in supply chain, what are your views on making just-in-time more accessible and eliminating logistic glitches?
Okay. So yeah, in terms of digitalization, how can it help in just-in-time logistics and just-in-time inventory management? Well, we are facing this a multitude of problems right now, because in order to have just in time we need a supply chain which is reliable. Right now the supply chain is not reliable through a lot of external factors. With the COVID outbreak, what is happening is the major ports are still clogged up, major ports all over the world. So what does this do is, when an exporter or an importer is planning its just in time inventory, they are expecting that every month a particular number of units will be arriving at their factory, and based on their demand they are clearing up their warehouses to make sure that the space is completely available and they are getting what they need. Unfortunately or fortunately for the warehousing sector, we are seeing a huge demand right now in the warehousing industry, because the importers and exporters are simply not sure how to maintain, despite digitalization, despite the digital in theory, yeah, digitalization is going to help a lot, because there is a lot of trend analysis happening to understand how much raw materials are being used in particular areas. But when we look in a practical scenario, based on the shipping line and supply chain uncertainties going on right now, I believe we have a long way to go for getting into the just in time mindset. We were getting closer to it, to be very honest, but once the pandemic has been hit, when you speak to various exporters and importers, they are more focused now. I need to do some stockpiling, because I need to have the peace of mind that even if there is another supply chain disruption in the future with perhaps a new wave of the pandemic, we will need the kind of cargo so that our industries can operate. So yes, digitalization very important for just in time. At the same time, practically with the global supply chain pandemic, just in time is no longer the talk of the town in the exim industry, unfortunately, right now.
Thank you, sir, for such a detailed answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the answer. Ankit, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, sir, for the insightful session. My question is, with the 10-minute delivery concept is coming, so will it not be increase the risk of accidents and keep the driver's life at a risk, since they will be forced to deliver it in a few minutes of time?
Right. That's a good question, and that's agreed. But it also depends. It's where the competition is heading. To be honest, like I personally feel like, yeah, with these 10 minutes and 20-minute deliveries which they are doing with a timeline, the pressure is really on the drivers, and it's also leading to accidents and rash driving. If you ask me honestly, I don't think we should have that kind of steep deadlines of 10 to 20 minutes. There have been talks of drone technology also now coming in the picture for delivery, but there are government clearances required for that. I personally feel that we are moving to a society where, so who knows if 10 minutes is also going to be enough and someone wants something within 5 minutes and within 6 minutes. But with the supply chain, there comes a lot of variabilities which are not in just the hands of the delivery person. Like if 10 minutes may be possible if everything happens in a very sequential and a very correct manner. But what happens in here is the delivery boy is involved in the last mile. So if there is a delay in the order, the entire pressure is falling on that poor delivery person, and it is leading to rash driving. It is leading to certain kind of accidents as well. I believe it would be helpful if the government also steps in here for at least a realistic expectation. Let's keep things to, like, how Domino's had started with a 30-minute pizza delivery or your money back. I mean, that changed the industry completely. And now we are moving to 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and even if you miss the timer by 1 minute, you are getting showcased into videos that this delivery person came late and there were so many issues for me because of that. So I personally don't know where this is going to end up and what are the price we are paying for, your goods to reach within 10 to 15 minutes. If there is a variation involved, it is helpful for all parties. I am completely in an advocate of having quality infrastructure and quality service, but at the same time creating an unrealistic demand, unrealistic expectation from the side of the customer is something which really needs to be looked into. I thank you for asking that question, because it's not easy to answer this question. I just feel it's something for self reflection on where can we head and how humanly we can ask for a good service, because some things are just getting to the point where it doesn't seem that possible anymore, to be honest.
Thank you, sir. I feel the same way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Ankit. We are extremely grateful to you, sir, for taking the time from your busy schedule and to address our students and answer the questions. We look forward for further association with you and PDP Group. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.